So now we're going to be talking about analogies. Analogies is a fairly important part of our verbal section, so it'll always be the first 5 or 6 questions. And it tests a very specific type of ability that if we get good at, allows us to solve in a relatively small amount of time, which gives us time for the more larger and more complicated questions in the verbal section. So it's important to be good at them. It's important to practice them a lot. It's important to be good at them. First of all, how it works. Well, this is kind of like an analogy question. I haven't filled in the words here, but this is the way it looks. We'll have 2 words, which will be the questions, and we'll have 4 answers with also a word here and a word here. And what we're going to have to do is make some sort of connection between my questioned words, and that connection, we'll have to put them in the answers and see which answer's connection is the most similar to my question's connection. And therein lies the difficulty. The difficulty lies in whether or not the answers are relatively similar as well. So the more similar the answers are themselves, the harder the question can be, which means that the importance of making an exact and objective connection is very, very important here in order that you'll be able to rule out and disqualify 3 of the questions so that you'll be able to circle the answer. So that's how it looks. Now we're going to be talking about, in this video, how we connect words. Everybody knows the connection between a pen and a paper, but everybody knows that connection. But if I told you to connect one with the other and say it verbally, it would be relatively harder. It's not something that we're used to doing day to day. And it's something that we're going to have to do in analogies in order to make a connection. We're going to have to connect 2 words, one of them defining the other word, using one of the words to define the other one. Let's take an example. Let's say wine and winery. Now, if someone didn't know what a winery is, let's say there was a person that had no idea what a winery was. He'd been in a winery, but he just doesn't know the name. I would need to explain what a winery is using my second word, which is wine. Okay, so how would I do this? I would say, wine is made in a winery. And now he'll know what the meaning of winery is. So that's basically what we're going to be trying to do with our words. We want to make a connection with one word using the other word, defining the other word. Now, our connection needs to be as objective, as clear, as specific as it can, because otherwise, let's say if I were to take carpenter and sawdust, okay, so I would say that, let's say I would say that sawdust is made by the carpenter. Now, this is true. Sawdust can be made by the carpenter, but it's too broad, right? Sawdust is made by the carpenter is too broad. It may not, if it's too broad, it may not rule out the amount of questions that will leave me with only one answer. Also, if I were to say that a carpenter, when making a table, can produce sawdust as a byproduct, it's a bit too specific. It may not, when I put it on the answers, you may not be able to see that during the answers because it's too specific. What I want to do is make a connection that's objective, objective and specific, but not too specific. I don't want to go too broad, and I don't want to go too specific. I want to be somewhere in the middle, a bit more leaning to the specific side, but not to go very, very, very specific like I did just now, because you'll see that it doesn't match the answers. What I'll want to say here, let's say, is sawdust is a byproduct of the work of a carpenter, right? I'm taking one of my words, I'm defining with the other words, and my connection is not too broad and not too specific. A very clear and exact connection. So that's what that is. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is, let's say if I had charlatan inexperience, the first thing that I'm going to want to do when I get to an analogy question the first thing that I'm going to need to do is to understand the meaning of the words in the question, right? If I had charlatan inexpertise, if I didn't know what charlatan was, I would be in a big problem. Now, we're going to talk about how we can try and resolve that problem in the later on videos, but it's important to know the meaning of the words. So charlatan and expertise, if I don't know the meaning, it would be hard for me to solve. I need to know what charlatan is. So when I'm approaching an analogy question, the first thing that I need to do is I need to understand the meaning of the words, and then try and make a connection that's not too objective, not too specific, and connect my two words using one word to define the other word. So here I would say, charlatan is someone who pretends to have expertise, but does not. Okay, that is a specific and exact connection here. So that's basically how we connect words. We don't want to make them too broad. We don't want to make them too specific. We want to make them, however, exact and per definition here, so that when we put them on the answers, they'll be able to rule out 3 questions and we'll be able to circle the next answer. The next thing that we're going to be talking about is difficult things that can arise in analogies and how I solve them, and how to approach a real question. This was just a broad way of making connections, and we haven't really solved the question. In the next videos, we'll actually be seeing how we solve a practical question in analogies.